Yes, who would like to start? So the role of men, I think Elsa gave us a hint, more than a hint, of the alliances that had to be formed, but are there any other reflections on the role that men played in the movement?
Professor Mark Figueroa and Professor Barry Evans, from the very outset, were supporters of the group and were members of the Women's Studies Development Groups on the Mona campus. I know that there were others, but I cannot recall the ones on the other campuses, but I do know they were supportive. But this support was not limited to just being members of the group, because we did have support from Sir Keith Hunt, who, although he warned us, was very supportive when our documents were brought in and were brought to the committees. The person who I mentioned who helped us with writing the proposal was Mr. Huma Solomon. The other thing he did was he advised us how to lobby committees. In other words, he gave us the mainstream tools and told us to use them, because without using them, we weren't going to get through to the mainstream. And so moving from being on the edges of the academy, in order to get a hold, we had to use that. And he was very supportive in that regard. We had other men who were supportive in a sense, but by and large, we had to really work hard to get support from and approval from the people who were in administration, and at that time those were practically all men.
I want to add, Elsa, that when it came to trying to change the discipline of history and to have the content which would help us to teach, when we introduced a course on women and gender, which I think is still being taught. Bridget, is Bridget here? Yes, it's still being taught. But it was developed in 1993, and later on it was helped by the contributions of the conference that we spoke about yesterday, that helped us to get material, because it was all well and good to say we want to now have gender analysis as a critical part of the discipline of history, but we didn't have the work. So I want us to remember all the men who contributed to that volume. In fact, we were asked, Barbara, at the time, how we were able to assemble so many men who were not, they would have been self-confident men in terms of the scholarship. I remember that remark being made. But I think of the work of Professor Barry Higman, who helped us to understand the gender relations of production under slavery. I think of the work of Hilary Beckles, who helped us to infuse gender analysis into resistance and agency. John Campbell, and so many others. So it's not only in terms of the alliances at the administrative level, but also the men whose scholarship helped us with the content we needed as we tried to use gender as an analytical tool and to theorize the field. Any men helped you, Peggy?
Well, Rex Nettleford. Rex was just incredible. Yes. It was Rex who made it possible for the Women in Development Unit to be established. And we'll always remember that.
Yes. Peggy?
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, Joycelin.
Oh, yes. Well, I had sterling support from the director of the ICR at that time, who was Dr. Vaughan Lewis, from the deputy director, Dr. Eddie Green, and also from the director of the St. Augustine branch of ICR, who were all male. They never faltered in giving advice and offering suggestions about how to move forward and sort of like paving the way for me to get going.
Yes, I think that mic is problematic. Barbara, and then Rhoda.
Well, I certainly thought that Vice Chancellor Nettleford gave solid support. I mean, I remember going to his office to say, look, the university has made a commitment by signing on to this project of research, outreach, and teaching. Now that it's ended, the university has a commitment to meet its promise to take on the responsibility of assigning staff and expanding staff. And he was extremely responsive. I certainly remember that was the first time we got an additional staff person outside of myself in the RCU, in the Regional Coordinating Unit. And I think gradually the principals across the campuses, particularly St. Augustine, I found, was extremely responsive. But it was a commitment that they had made by signing on to the project of cooperation in teaching, research, and outreach.
If I could just add, Sir Alistair McIntyre.
Yes, I wanted to say.
When the first, who was Vice Chancellor at the time, when the project was ended, the project had written into it a condition that the UWI was to assume responsibility for institutionalizing women and development studies when the project ended. And when the project ended, the university was going through a serious financial crisis. And there was a great deal of pressure for Vice Chancellor McIntyre to say, look, Vice Chancellor Preston had signed on this. I don't know anything about it. We can't do it because we don't have the funds. And he was adamant. He said, a principal is involved here. We signed on to do this, and we will do it. And so he was responsible for signing. So Vice Chancellor McIntyre, I think, definitely was one man who was very supportive of us.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to say that at the St. Augustine campus, we had some male members. Among them was the former principal of this St. Augustine campus, Professor Lloyd Braffett, as well as lecturer in engineering, Dr. Hamid Farabi, and some others. I just wanted to mention, Dave, you are a member of the group? I was going to mention that Dave Dolly introduced one of the, I think the second academic course on this campus, which is still being taught, which is gender issues in agriculture. And that was a very important development for us, because being an interdisciplinary program, and Dave is there, he presented, it was important for us to have courses in different faculties. So we have always been very happy for that. And Dave has continued to work very closely as an associate member of staff. I also want to mention Zafar Ali, because when I came back to the St. Augustine campus, and I was in the first years a representative on the project, he had to do a lot of the administrative things to make it happen. And of course, Professor Alistair McIntyre, I remember him at a later stage, because the issue of the location of the CGDS, IGDS was raised. And there's always been debate about whether we should be in a faculty or outside a faculty. And my recollection is that in the early years, Professor Auger, Roy Auger was the Vice Chancellor's representative on our steering committee. And it was his opinion that we should fit in what was then the Faculty of Arts and General Studies, which is now the Faculty of Humanities. And he argued strongly that because the general part of it was interdisciplinary. And I remember that was one of the reasons it took us 11 years to be institutionalized. Because at that time, the groups had people from science, education, humanities, social sciences, agriculture, and we said, how could we be institutionalized in one